Good evening. For my research project, I focused on MTSS. And for many of you who may not know what MTSS is, it's a multi-tiered system of support, and for short, we say MTSS. For my school, I had Willow Drive Elementary School located in Sumter, South Carolina. A background overview of MTSS. MTSS is a foundational evidence-based framework for effectively integrating multiple systems and services to address students' academic achievements, behavior, and social emotional well-being. What brought me to this topic was basically the circumstances that we are in right now with the pandemic. To come to this, I asked my principal at my school, what do you need from me as a school psychologist intern? What would you like to see improved at this point in time? And basically what he mentioned, MTSS covers. Like I said, academic achievement, behavior, social emotional well-being, and even some attendance stuff is what we're seeing mostly at my school. And RTI. RTI is another acronym or support for MTSS. And what RTI is a process in the multi-tiered system approach for providing services and interventions to struggling learners at increasing levels. And so what we talk about a lot is the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 in the school. And I know some of us are like, well, what are these tiers that we're talking about? So basically, to keep it short, a tier 1 is for all students as part of the high quality core classroom experience. Tier 2 is where kids move up who need a little bit more help. Maybe that tier 1 universal system is not working for them, and tier 2 provides data. It's data informed, it's targeted instructions that support the core instructions, and is delivered in small group or either one-on-one settings inside of the gen ed classroom. And so if kids are still struggling, they still need that little extra push, they can move up to a tier 3. And a tier 3 is a more intense in time and frequency than tier 2 interventions, and that's where a lot of that one-on-one come in at a tier. So what I did was, after speaking with my principal, I said, okay, I went to an MTSS meeting at my school, and I kept hearing attendance is the problem, or this child doesn't know this or that, and we need to screen. You need to figure out what area they may be lacking on. So what I did was I got in contact with the school nurse, some teachers at Willow Drive, speech language pathologist, physical therapist, occupational therapist, and we set up a clinic. So I provided cards to each student that came to that clinic, and so what they did was they went to the school nurse first to get vision and hearing checked. And if they passed vision and hearing, then they came to me and I assessed cognitive. And then after I finished, they went to the speech pathologist. And what I did was I also had parents to sign consent forms during that screening, and I also provided them with developmental history background forms, and that allowed them to complete that. So I can know once I looked at the data and looked at the background or the child's background, maybe it's something in the home or environmental or at birth. And so that's what I did to gather all of those bits and pieces of information. So I'll tell you a little bit more as we move on. So those are the participants in the data that I collect. So the materials that I use, materials and criteria that I used for me to assess cognitive, I used a screener that's called a RIST. And what the RIST does, it gives a quick and efficient measure of general intelligence that is strongly correlated with the RIOS, which is like the mama of the risks, and it provides that verbal and nonverbal part of it. And that's kind of what we look at as school sites. We look immediately at that verbal and nonverbal, and we say, okay, we might need to do something. And so my speech pathologist, she used the preschool language scales 5th edition PLS, which offered a little bit more comprehensive developmental language as far as looking into children, and that's what it screened, that pre-verbal interaction, emerging language, those early literacy things in children. She also, for the bigger kids, we had like some fourth graders, third, fourth graders. She used the clinical evaluation of language fundamentals, 5th edition, for them, and it's a screener as well, and it kind of took in the aspect of how they followed directions, sentence repetition, grammatical sentences, all kind of stuff. And as I said, the school nurse, she checked vision and hearing. I provided consent and background and developmental history forms. So at this point of the presentation, I wanted to present the team with my MTSS tracking. Is something I created after I did the screening, and after my other team members did their screening. I put it all together on this wonderful Excel, and the reason why I cannot share it is because I did not de-identify those kids, and I had about 28 kids on there. But if I was presenting live, I would have shown you guys. But with that being said, I organized that tracking sheet with attendance to see who missed a ton of days, or maybe they're on the right track, who passed speech, who passed vision and hearing or did not pass, or who passed with me or did not pass. And what I did was I had one column that says, yes, you need to further evaluate in the area of speech or cognitive, or you do not. This kid just simply need intervention. So that's basically what is on that Microsoft Excel sheet. So after that, I went a step further, because what I noticed, I went on to evaluate, but the teachers was missing like huge pieces of the puzzle that I needed. So I created a drive or teacher interview on a Google Drive, and what I do, I called it a pretest, and the pretest was intended to help the school and communities, because we were looking to reach out to the parents as well and families, because we're in COVID. And when I say reach out, we want to know like why such and such is not coming to school, because this could be a lack of instruction issue. So like I said, that form was intended to help school communities strategically plan family, school, and community partnering within the MTSS process. And so in the study, I asked the teachers certain questions, and I just wanted to even test their knowledge to make sure they were aware of what this MTSS process was all about before continuing on with my evaluation. And I also included that by participating in the study, you would be automatically entered for a free gift card, and also one of my teachers did win a free gift card. So one of the questions I asked was, what does MTSS stand for? And I'm happy that all 23 participants got this question correct. So it was 100%. Everybody knew what MTSS stood for. Another question was, what does RTI stand for? And 23 responses, about 22 out of the 23 got this question correct. So I wasn't like completely concerned. Another question I asked was assessing all students to determine if any are at risk or are below the level of expected performance for their grade is called. And 11 out of 22 people answered this question correctly by saying that it's called a screener. And some said progress monitoring, some said universal methods was their answer. So far, just looking at that was giving me the tools that I needed to bring back to the team when I had the next MTSS meeting. So that was very important, that I knew that part of what my teachers knew and what they did not. Another question I asked them was, Tier 1 of MTSS is 4. And about 16 out of 23 teachers got this correct. They said it was all students, and some said some at-risk students who need small group instruction. So about 7 of them said that, and that was incorrect. So I knew that I needed to create something. Once again, in my head, I was thinking as I looked at the results of this, that I needed to create something to allow my teachers to know what this MTSS process and what these tiers are for before referring. Another question I asked was, the MTSS at your current school has changed the methods of teaching in your classroom. And about 65.2% said that they felt neutral about that. So I said, okay, maybe they like, or maybe they just don't have any feelings towards the MTSS process. 17% agreed, 8% disagreed, maybe about 3% felt they strongly agreed with that, and about 5% strongly disagreed with that. So that gave me some more that I needed to know. Another question I asked was, how would you rate your understanding of the MTSS program at your school? And about 39.1% said it was acceptable. About 30% said it was good. 21% said it was poor. And 8.7% said it was very good. So once again, I knew I needed to create something universal to kind of figure out why my 21% feel like the MTSS process at the school is poor, or what is it, something that they're lacking on that I can help. Another question I asked was, what type of assessment is used to progress monitor assess a range of skills, and content across the curriculum. So about 8% got this question right. So I know I needed to go in and let them know the difference between curriculum-based assessments, curriculum-based measures, and why we refer kids for special needs. So I knew I had some work to do, basically. Another question I asked was, what percentage of students might normally require a tier 3? And 16% of out of the 23 got this question correct. So I'm glad. About 1.1 to 5% of students are tier 3. Typically, tier 1, tier 2 works for students if you're implementing your interventions or whatever you need with fidelity, or doing what you need to do in the classroom to make sure everyone is learning. And I know everyone learned at a different pace, but percent got this question right. Another question I asked was, which of the following is not one of the key practices of MTSS? And 19% said they focus only on students with disabilities, and that was the correct answer. That's not one of the key principles of MTSS. We don't just focus on students with disabilities. We look at all students. That's the purpose of it. Another question was, in MTSS, universal screenings is used to predict students at risk, and more than half of my teachers got this right, which was good. I wanted them to know that the purpose of me, coming in a screen and setting up this clinic was just to figure out, if the children really needed to be evaluated, and to gather their knowledge so we can know what to do for the next time. And lastly, the question I asked was, have you ever referred a student to the MTSS team? And 61% said yes, and 38.1% said no. So that's more than half of my school that has referred kids, and I can tell because I'm screening those kids. So overall, my goal with this whole thing was to help teachers, or provide teachers with intervention. So their first thought will not be, let me refer them because I feel like they have an issue. I wanted them to see that there are ways and there are steps we take before referring. And I want to do it, with fidelity. At this point, I would have shared my teacher interview Google Drive with you guys and enriched data on how this transferred into the teacher interview, and then I use it to put in Enrich, which is a tool we use when we present to parents or present in a IEP meeting or a referral planning meeting. But because I cannot de-identify a student with the enriched data, I created this notebook as a product of when I go to MTSS meetings. If teachers ask me questions, I like to be on my P's and Q's. So here's a paper form, basically a paper form of that enriched data. And I don't pass it out because teachers they love electronic stuff. And so I share this, and in the meeting, I can go down and say, such and such can currently do this in the classroom. They currently cannot do this in the classroom. Here is the strategies they may lack. This is what we need. And it has literally been the best thing. So that's created that. At this point, we would have had a discussion, but the question was, what does this mean for the field? So for the field of school psychology, because of the MTSS and what I created, the product, you have to really be organized. The purpose of this is to improve knowledge, help more students and families, provide evidence-based material, provide interventions, make sure kids are on correct tiers, and to implement it with value. The limitations I faced was due to COVID-19. The limitations was, lack of instruction with kids because attendance was a problem. Virtual meetings, just simply PPEs, wearing masks, and, when I'm screening and constantly sanitizing, it took a little longer. And parental involvement seemed to decrease during this time because, unfortunately, this is not parents' priorities right now. So that was the limitations I faced with calling parents and trying to make sure they're still interested and all this good stuff. And here's my citations.